Make my father smile once, I'll erase your debts, the Mafia Boss promised. The Waitress. Vertical bar Mafia Boss love stories. The humid, 3 o'clock in the morning air of the Baltimore Docklands clung to Harper Quinn like a second, cheaper skin. It smelled of salt, diesel, and old fish, a perfume she knew better than her own. Harper worked the graveyard shift at the Gull's Nest, a diner that served lukewarm coffee and lukewarm comfort to truckers and longshoremen. Her apron was stained, her feet ached, but the real weight wasn't the tray. It was the $50,000 in medical debt her mother's failing lungs had accrued, and the extra $10,000 in high-interest vig from the Pier Street crew, a loan that now doubled every week. Tonight, the diner was unusually tense. A back booth, typically reserved for dock royalty, was occupied by a city councilman slumming it for votes. The corner booth, the one with the cracked vinyl and the view of the water, held the Pier Street collectors, tapping their greasy fingers on the formica. Harper was moving fast, balancing 2 trays. One held the councilman's watery beer, the other held a single heavy crystal tumbler of 25-year-old bourbon poured neat. It was for the Pier Street boss, a ritualistic offering of peace she was forced to provide nightly. A trucker, blind drunk, stumbled from the restroom, shoving past her. Trays clattered, Harper, in a desperate, fluid motion, saved both from crashing but swapped them in the chaos. The bourbon landed in front of the councilman, the beer landed in front of the loan shark. Before Harper could speak, the councilman, eager to look like one of the guys, raised the tumbler. To the working man, he bellowed, and downed the amber liquid in one go. The loan shark stared at his beer with disgust. "What's this?" But his complaint was lost. The councilman began to cough, a wet, hacking sound. His face turned a blotchy red. My throat," he wheezed, clawing at his collar. He wasn't dying, but the specially heavily medicated bourbon, dosed for a man with a much higher, near-lethal tolerance, was burning him from the inside out. He staggered, knocking over his chair. The diner erupted. The Pier Street crew stood, hands moving inside their jackets. The front door of the Gull's Nest opened, admitting a column of cold, rainy air and 3 men. The diner fell silent, dead silent. The man in the center was Cassian Rourke. He was young, perhaps not yet 30, but he moved with an ancient, predatory stillness. His suit was dark, bespoke, and somehow perfectly dry despite the downpour. He didn't look at the choking councilman or the hostile loan sharks. He looked at Harper. "Amen," Cassian said, his voice a low rumble. "Handle the councilman, water, and call his driver." His bodyguard, a mountain named Amon, nodded and moved with terrifying efficiency. Cassian Rourke stepped forward, placing himself between Harper and the Pier Street crew. He smiled, a cold, thin expression that held no warmth. "Gentlemen, a misunderstanding. The councilman seems to have a weak stomach for real liquor." The Pier Street boss, recognizing a power far beyond his own, slowly sat back down. The tension didn't leave. It simply coiled, waiting. Cassian's gaze finally settled on Harper. His eyes were the color of the harbor at night, dark and deep. He noticed the slight tremor in her hand, and something else. The wire. A tiny, almost invisible wire running from her apron pocket to her collar. He didn't react. He simply took her arm, his grip firm but not brutal. "You're done for the night." He walked her not to the staff room, but straight out the back door into the alley. The rain hit them instantly, plastering Harper's thin uniform to her skin. "Let go of me," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. Cassian released her. He stood under the weak yellow glow of the security light, the rain tracing patterns on his perfect suit. A mini recorder. That's brave. And stupid. You think that'll stop them when they decide to collect? "It's proof," Harper whispered, her hands clenched. "Proof of their threats." Cassian almost laughed. "Proof. In this part of the city, proof is just something they find in your pocket after they pull you from the water." He took a step closer. She could smell the expensive wool of his coat and something clean, like soap and steel. "You're in debt," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Pier Street. How much?" "That's none of your business." "It is now. You almost poisoned a city official in front of my associates. You created a problem." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "I am offering to solve a different one." Harper stared at him, confused. "What?" "My father," Cassian said, his gaze turning distant, hard. "He's hosting his anniversary gala in 2 weeks, a private affair. He hasn't smiled not once. Not a genuine smile since my brother was killed, since the Camden Spur ambush." He looked back at her, his focus so intense it felt physical. "Here is the deal. You come work for me. You'll be the event coordinator. You will be inside my home, and you will find a way to make my father smile. One time." Harper blinked, the rain dripping from her nose. "You're insane. I'm a waitress. What do you want me to do? Tell him a joke." "I don't care what you do," Cassian said, his voice flat. "Make him smile once. I'll erase all your debts, your mother's medical bills. Cleared, the Pier Street animals. Gone from your life. I will personally see their ledgers burned." It was an impossible offer, a fairy tale wrapped in barbed wire. But Harper looked into Cassian Rourke's eyes, and beneath the dangerous, chilling control, she saw a flicker of something she recognized, a deep, hairline fracture of suppressed pain. He was just as desperate as she was, only his currency was different. "Why me?" she asked, the words stolen by the wind. "Because you're desperate," Cassian said, "and because you were smart enough to try and record them. You're a survivor. I need a survivor, not a party planner." Harper took a shaky breath. This was a vortex, a dark, swirling pull into a world she had only served coffee to. But the alternative was Pier Street. The alternative was losing her mother. "I do it," she said, "and the debts are gone. All of them. All of them." "I have your word." Cassian nodded once. He pulled a phone from his pocket, not his own, but a sleek, black, featureless burner. "This is yours now. Encrypted. Eamon will be with you at all times. You are, until this is over. Rourke property." He handed her the phone. His fingers brushed hers. They were warm. The simple human contact sent a jolt through her, a strange, unwelcome spark. He saw the flicker in her eyes and his expression hardened. "Do not look at me like I am a good man, Harper." Harper clutched the phone, her new lifeline, her new chain. "I don't need a good man," she replied, her voice steady for the first time. "I need one who keeps his word." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Eamon will pick you up at 6. Go home. Get dry." He turned and walked back into the diner, a shadow rejoining the night. Harper stood in the rain for a full minute, the encrypted phone heavy in her hand. Later that week, from the back of Cassian's armored sedan, she caught her first glimpse of the man she had to save, Cormac Rourke. He was standing at the window of a high-rise office, staring down at the port. His face was granite, carved by grief and power, unmoving and unbreakable. Harper's heart sank. How, she thought, do you make a statue smile? Harper was no fool. An event coordinator for a mafia family was a role that didn't exist. She was a pawn, a distraction, or a very strange, desperate gamble. She was given a room in the Rourke penthouse, a sterile, gray-on-gray cage of glass overlooking the harbor, and a laptop. Eamon, her constant shadow, sat in the hall. She was a prisoner with a paycheck she'd never get to spend. So she worked. She didn't plan a party. She conducted an investigation. Her target was the smile, the absence of it. She started with the public record, cross-referencing Rourke family news with the date Cassian had given her, the Camden Spur ambush. It was 5 years ago. Cormac Rourke's youngest son, Declan, 21 years old, had been killed instantly when his car exploded on the bridge. The case was closed, listed as gang-related violence. But the smile, Harper learned, had died that day with him. She dug deeper, using the secure laptop to access old city archives, looking for Cormac's life before, and she found him. Not the stone-faced patriarch, but a younger man with laughter lines, a black and white photo from 1992, grainy and alive. Cormac Rourke, grinning, holding a pair of drumsticks, sitting behind a full kit. The caption read, Cormac the Hammer Rourke at the Moonlight Dock Club. A jazz drummer. The man was a musician. She found the club. It was derelict now, a boarded-up husk on a forgotten pier, but the stage was still there. She waited until Cassian returned, late, smelling of the cold and something metallic. She met him in his study, the photo displayed on her laptop. "This is the man you want to make smile," she said, not asking. Cassian stared at the image. His face tightened. "Where did you get this?" "Public record. He played drums. Declan, his son." "Did he play too?" "This isn't part of the deal," Cassian said, turning away. "It is if you want it to work," Harper pushed, stepping in front of him. "You don't want a party. You want a resurrection. And it's tied to this, to the Moonlight Dock, and to the Camden Spur." He looked at her, his eyes cold. The Camden Spur was a hit, sanctioned by the Atlantic Dockyard Organization, the ADO. The ADO, a fiction, as far as the world knows, a council of the East Coast families. They coordinate shipping, logistics, interests. They decided my brother was a liability, so they removed him. He said it with all the emotion of a weather report. "And you're, what, fighting them?" "I am managing them," he corrected. "And you are coordinating a party. Stick to the music. Leave the rest." But Harper couldn't. The Pier Street crew was still breathing down her neck, a phantom limb of fear. Cassian had paused their collection, but he hadn't erased them. Not yet. She needed leverage. She needed to know just how managed the ADO was. A name from her diner days resurfaced, a Pier Street enforcer who bragged about moving heavy cargo from an abandoned boatyard, using her encrypted phone. She tracked the boatyard's location. It was a stupid, suicidal risk. She told Eamon she was scouting locations. He didn't believe her, but his orders were to follow, not to question. He parked the sedan a quarter-mile away, his disapproval a tangible thing. She slipped through a rusted chain-link fence, the smell of low tide and creosote thick in the air. In a basin shielded from the main channel, a trawler was tied up. The Pier Street boss was there, nervously overseeing the unloading of long, wooden crates. But he wasn't talking to his own men. He was talking to a man in a tailored suit, an ADO insider by his bearing. They were making an arms deal. Harper's heart hammered. This was it. Proof. She raised the encrypted phone, zooming in, the lens cutting through the fog. She snapped photos of the crates, the insider's face, the Pier Street boss. And then she panned, just slightly. A third man was there, standing in the shadows of the trawler's bridge, deep in negotiation. He was separate from the Pier Street crew, clearly the one in charge. He turned his head, and the weak light caught the sharp, familiar line of his jaw. Cassian. He wasn't managing the ADO. He wasn't fighting them. He was doing business with them, the same people who had killed his brother. He wasn't clean. He wasn't a savior. He was just the biggest shark in the tank. A loose piece of gravel shifted under her foot. Cassian's head snapped up, his eyes, even at this distance, found hers instantly. A look of pure, cold fury crossed his face. He started to move, but before he could take a step, a searchlight swept the boatyard, followed by the blare of a Coast Guard horn. Someone had been watching the watchers. "Run!" the ADO man yelled. The Pier Street crew scattered, dropping a crate. Cassian didn't run. He moved toward her, a dark, fast-moving shadow. Instead of grabbing her, instead of yelling, he did something else. He hooked an arm around her waist, yanking her from her hiding spot and into the deepest shadow behind a rusted, overturned hull. He slammed her back against the cold steel, his body pressing her into the darkness. One hand clamped hard over her mouth. He was hot, solid, and terrifying. "Not," he breathed, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, a single sound. They stood there for an eternity, pressed together so tightly she could feel the frantic beat of his heart, or maybe it was her own. The Coast Guard horn faded, shouts echoed and then died. The boatyard was empty again. Cassian didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then slowly, he removed his hand from her mouth. He didn't step back. "You're a part of this," she whispered, her voice ragged. "You're dealing arms with them." "I am securing my position," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "You were told to coordinate, not to follow." "I needed leverage," she shot back, "and I just found it. You're using the Pier Street crew as mules for the ADO." He finally stepped back, giving her air. He looked at her, and the anger was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp assessment. "What do you want?" "Harper." "The Moonlight Dock. You want to move your father. You do it there. I can stage it. I can get his old bandmates. I can recreate the night from that photo. And in return, you're not just managing Pier Street, you're running them. You have their books, the real ones, the ones that show the money laundering through the cold storage port. I want to break that crew for good." He stared at her. "You give me the Moonlight Dock. I give you the ledgers to burn Pier Street." "Done," she said. They walked back to the car in silence. Harper slid in, the encrypted phone feeling like a brick in her pocket. She felt the need to push, to know the boundary. "When this is over, I'm out, completely. The ADO won't look for me." Cassian turned, his face unreadable in the dashboard lights. "I promised to clear your debts. Harper, I never promised you peace. If the ADO takes an interest in you, that's a different price." As he got in the driver's side, Eamon, who had seen it all, caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "In the Rourke house, miss," he said, his voice a low gravel. "A smile costs blood." The Moonlight Dock was a cathedral of ghosts. Cobwebs hung like tattered lace, and the air smelled of brine and decay. But Harper saw what it had been. Cassian's men worked for 3 days, reinforcing the floor, cleaning the glass, and running new, discreet power lines. Harper, meanwhile, did the real work. She used old union rosters and bar tabs to find them. The original band, 2 were dead, but the trumpeter, Silas, now 70, and the bass player, Jonah, were still in Baltimore. She met them in a quiet diner, not unlike the Gull's Nest. She didn't offer money. She offered a memory. "For Cormac," she'd said, "and for Declan, he used to sit in, didn't he?" Silas had looked at her, his old eyes sharp. The boy had rhythm. The father had a soul. "We'll play." Harper arranged the stage exactly as it was in the 1992 photograph. The drum kit, polished to a high sheen, sat center. Beside it, she placed a simple, empty wooden chair. Not a spotlight on it, just a space, a presence defined by absence. In the vast empty ballroom of the Rourke penthouse, 2 nights before the event, Cassian stared at a blank piece of paper. He was trying to write a speech. "I can't find the words," he growled, crumpling a sheet. "This is ridiculous. I can negotiate a freight tariff for 500,000 tons, but I can't. This..." Harper took the paper from his desk. It had 1 word, crossed out sorry. "You're trying to apologize," she said softly. "You can't. Men like your father don't hear apologies. They hear weakness." "Then what do I say?" "You don't say, you remember. Don't talk about the Camden Spur. Talk about the first time Declan snuck into the Moonlight Dock. Talk about the time he dropped a drumstick and your father covered for him without missing a beat." She stepped closer. "Don't be a boss. Cassian, be a son." His gaze locked on hers, the armor cracking for a second. The penthouse ballroom was dark, save for a single standing lamp that cast a pool of golden light. Dust motes danced in the beam. Harper had asked Silas, the trumpeter, to bring his practice brushes. He sat on a stool, tapping a gentle, whispering rhythm on a snare drum. "Shh, shh, shh, shh." "The music will be the lure," Harper explained, her voice low. "But you have to guide him. He won't go on his own." "Guide him how?" "You'll walk with him. When you finish your speech, you'll put a hand on his back and you'll walk him to the stage." She paused. "We should practice. The transition." Cassian looked stiff. "Practice walking." "Practice not feeling like you're leading him to a firing squad." She held out a hand. "Just, sway. It's a slow tune." He hesitated, then placed one hand lightly on her back. His other hand took hers. It was the first time they had touched by choice. His palm was warm and slightly rough. The heat of it seeped through the thin fabric of her shirt, a startling, intimate pressure. They moved in a small, awkward circle. The brush-on snare, the only sound. The dust spun around them. "I'm terrified," Harper admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. She wasn't looking at him, but at the light on the floor. "Not of this. Not of you. Of the bills. Of my mother's breathing. Of being pulled so far into this shadow, that I forget what the gull's nest even looked like." Cassian stopped moving. Though he didn't let go, the music continued its soft pulse. "When this is done," he said, his voice a low, rough promise. "When he smiles, you are gone. The ledgers, the medical debt, all of it. I will personally drive you to a bus station and you will never see Baltimore or me again. You will be free of the vortex. I swear it." She finally looked up at him. His face was close, his dark eyes searching hers. "And you," she whispered. "I will be here." The admission was stark. He pulled her a fraction closer. His hand on her back was no longer light. It was firm, claiming, grounding. He wasn't dancing. He was holding on. She could feel the solid wall of his chest, the slow, steady beat of his heart under her palm. He was real. This was the man from the boatyard, the man who dealt in shadows, and he was holding her like a lifeline. The moment was broken by the click of the door. Eamon stood there. "Sir, we have a problem." Cassian dropped his hands instantly, the warmth vanishing, the armor slamming back into place. "What?" "Pier Street. They're not just waiting, they're talking, spreading a rumor that the new girl at the Rourke house, this event stylist, is a federal lure. They're painting a target on her. They're naming the Bureau of Integrity and Investigation." Harper felt her blood run cold. By a fictional agency, but the threat was real. "They're trying to flush her out," Cassian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Make her run or make the ADO nervous." "It's working," Eamon said. "The ADO council is asking who she is." "Handle it." "Help." Cassian looked at Harper, then back at Eamon. "Tell them she's just a stylist, someone I hired to make the place look good, insignificant. Tell them I take full responsibility for her." Eamon nodded, but his eyes lingered on Harper, a warning. Cassian had just publicly tied her to him. It wasn't protection. It was a leash. If she failed, she didn't just default on a deal. She brought down the Rourke family's honor. The lie bound them tighter than any touch. Later that night, unable to sleep, Harper crept from her room. She heard Cassian's low voice from his study. He was on his encrypted phone. "Yes, a full safe corridor," he was saying, "from the penthouse to the dock and 2 blocks radius. No uniforms, no city police, just our people. I want it sterile. If anyone breaks that perimeter, you handle it. No questions, no witnesses. I want blood on the cobblestones before they get within 50 yards. Understood?" He was promising a massacre to protect a memory. She retreated to her room. The night of the gala was approaching. She went to the Moonlight dock for the final rehearsal. Silas and Jonah played the opening bars of a slow, mournful blues tune that Cormac had loved. Cormac himself was there, at Cassian's insistence. He sat in the back, a stone in the shadows. As the first notes of the trumpet cut through the dusty air, Harper watched him. She saw his fingers twitch on the armrest, tapping a silent, perfect rhythm. She saw his eyes close, and for a fraction of a second the granite around his eyes softened. But the corner of his mouth did not move. It remained a flat, hard line. The moonlight dock was unrecognizable. The scent of decay was gone, replaced by old wood polish, expensive bourbon, and the faint, nervous perfume of Baltimore's elite underworld. Men whose hands had broken bones now held delicate glasses of champagne. Wives with cold eyes and warm jewels nodded to each other. This was the Rourke's power, gathered and quiet. Harper was a shadow among them, dressed in simple black trousers and a silk blouse. She was wired into the security feed. Her earpiece connected her to Eamon, who was managing the perimeter. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt louder than the quiet murmur of the crowd. She was directing traffic, making sure the right people were seated. But her real job was to watch. A server in a crisp white jacket approached Cormac Rourke, who was standing alone by the newly installed glass, looking out at the water. The server carried a single, extravagant bouquet of white lilies. "A delivery for Mr. Cormac Rourke," the server said. Eamon's voice crackled in Harper's ear. "That server isn't one of ours. Stop him!" Before Harper could move, Cassian intercepted the bouquet. "I'll take that." His voice was smooth, but his eyes were ice. He took the flowers and handed them to a bodyguard, his gaze fixed on the small card attached. He palmed it, turning slightly. Harper moved closer, pretending to check a seating chart. She saw his knuckles go white as he read. He held it so she could see. It wasn't a card. It was a small, ink drawing of the Camden Spur Bridge, skeletal and stark. Beneath it, 2 words were written in an elegant, sharp script: "The Saltwater Stranger." Cassian's breath hitched. He knew the name. "The Bomber," he whispered, his voice so low only she could hear. He looked up, his eyes sweeping the room. No longer a host, but a predator. "Eamon, code red. Seal the exits." Harper's attention was snagged by something else. The new catering staff, hired by the venue and not by the Rourkes, were moving with too much purpose. She'd noticed it earlier. 4 of them, 2 men, 2 women. They were all wearing their hair in a specific tight knot, a double loop twist. It was a utility bun, the kind she'd seen federal agents use in news footage to keep hair clear of gear. As she watched, one of the female servers bent to retrieve a dropped napkin near the ADO table, her hand lingering too long, planting a small, black disc beneath the chair. The Bureau of Integrity and Investigation, the BII, they were here, and they were planning bugs. "Cassian," she whispered, touching his sleeve. "The catering staff, they're feds." His gaze snapped to her, then followed her subtle nod. He saw the bun, the stiff posture. He cursed under his breath. The room was now a 3-way trap. The lights dimmed. A single, warm spotlight hit the stage. It was time. Cassian moved to the microphone. The room fell silent. He looked not at the crowd, but at his father. "We are here," Cassian began, his voice amplified, steady, not to mark an anniversary, but to remember a sound, the sound of this room when it was alive. He didn't use the speech they had practiced. He spoke from memory. "I remember my brother, Declan, sitting on that empty chair trying to copy every move our father made on the drums. He dropped a stick, and my father, he didn't miss a beat. He covered for him. He made him sound good." He looked at Cormac. "Dad, the band is here. They're waiting." He walked off the stage, through the stunned silence, and stopped in front of his father. He didn't offer a hand. He just waited. For 5 seconds, Cormac Rourke did not move. Then, slowly, the statue stood. He walked to the stage, moving like a man in a dream. Harper was waiting by the drum kit. She held out the old, familiar wooden drumsticks. Cormac stared at them. His hand, scarred and powerful, reached out and took them. He sat. Silas, on trumpet, raised his horn. Jonah plucked a single, low note on the bass. Cormac raised the sticks. He brought them down, and the sound was wrong, a harsh, clattering thwack that echoed painfully. The crowd tensed. Cormac closed his eyes. He exhaled, a long, ragged breath. He raised the sticks again. This time he came down in a soft, perfect brushstroke roll. Shh, shh. Silas joined, a mournful, sweet melody. The music began. It was a slow, aching blues. Cormac's hands, stiff at first, began to loosen. He wasn't just playing, he was talking. The rhythm was a lament, a story of loss and rage and deep, buried love. The room held its breath. Harper watched his face. The lines of grief were still there, but the tension in his jaw, it was easing. His shoulders relaxed. And then, as Silas hit a high, sweet note of pure resolution, the corner of Cormac Rourke's mouth twitched. It lifted. It was the ghost of a beginning of a smile. Now a voice roared. 3 smoke grenades detonated at the room's exits, filling the air with thick, acrid gray. The crowd screamed. Through the smoke, 3 men in Pier Street jackets burst forward, but they were a distraction. A 4th man, masked and dressed in black, lunged for the stage, a knife in his hand, aimed at Cormac. Cassian moved faster than Harper thought possible. He launched himself at the stage, not at the attacker, but at his father, tackling him from the drum stool. Dad, down. They crashed behind the amplifiers. The masked man was on the stage, turning, momentarily confused. Harper reacted on pure instinct. She wasn't a fighter. She was a waitress. She grabbed the heaviest thing she could reach the base of the steel spotlight and shoved. The heavy lamp toppled, smashing onto the stage. It threw the entire platform into blinding, disorienting darkness and sparks. The attacker yelled in pain as the hot lamp hit him. Eamon was on him a second later, a tackle that shook the reinforced floor. The man fought, slipping free, and vaulted over the side of the stage, disappearing into the panicked, smoke-filled crowd. The room was chaos. "BI, everyone stay down!" The federal agents, their cover blown, drew their weapons, expecting a full-scale mafia war. Harper, crawling behind the soundboard, saw her chance. She slammed her hand on the main console, seizing the microphone. "Thank you for that amazing tribute," she yelled, her voice booming over the PA system, cutting through the screams. "We are live streaming this wonderful charity jazz night in memory of Declan Rourke. All proceeds go to the Port Orphans Fund. Let's have a round of applause." The BII agents froze. Their covert raid was now in the middle of a public charity event being live-streamed. They were exposed, their operation compromised. The lead agent, his face a mask of fury, signaled his team, pull back now." As the smoke cleared, Eamon limped back to the stage, holding something in his hand. He gave it to Cassian. It was a lapel pin, a detailed silver pin of the ADO crest. "It's a fake," Cassian said, his voice deadly. "Too clean. It was planted. They wanted us to find this. They wanted us to go to war." The crowd was being ushered out by Rourke's men. Cormac was safe, leaning against the wall, his breathing heavy. The moment was gone. The stone was back in place. Cassian walked over to Harper, who was shaking by the soundboard. He looked at her, his gaze unreadable. "I owe you," he said. "This isn't about money anymore." He turned to Eamon. "Move everything, all the books, the hard ledgers. Tonight, burn the old safe house." As Eamon's men began clearing the back office, Harper, following Cassian, saw a stack of ledgers being loaded into a steel case. One was marked differently. It wasn't numbers. It was a title, the Port Orphans Fund. And beneath it, in the same sharp, elegant script as the bridge drawing, was the authorization signature, the Saltwater Stranger. The penthouse was suffocatingly quiet. The faint smell of smoke from the Moonlight dock clung to the air, a reminder of how close they had come to disaster. Harper cornered Cassian in his study, holding the replica of the ledger she had photographed with her encrypted phone. The signature was sharp, clear, and damning. "The Saltwater Stranger," she said, her voice flat. "The same name on the card, the same name on your charity fund. It's not a bomber, is it? It's one of yours. Who is it?" Cassian looked at the image, his face a mask of exhaustion and something deeper, something akin to grief. He was silent for a long time, listening to the hum of the city 10 stories below. "Maeve," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "My cousin, Maeve Rourke." He ran a hand through his hair. She was the family's financial genius, saw numbers like a musician sees notes. She and Declan were close. After the Camden Spur, she vanished. We all assumed she was dead, drowned herself in the harbor, unable to take the grief. "But she's not," Harper stated, fitting the pieces together. "She's been here all along. The bomber, the attacker, the fund. She's playing a long game. She controls the Orphans Fund, which is a blind trust that moves Rourke money. She's been using it as a weapon." A new clue from Eamon's salvaged security logs from the dock pointed them to a holding facility Maeve used, Pelican 42 cold storage. It was a fortress of refrigerated steel. Cashin opened it with a key Harper had never seen him use. Inside, it wasn't fish, it was art, dozens of stolen paintings, Monets, a small Vermeer, modern abstracts all leaning against racks of frozen cargo, all used to wash millions of dollars. But that wasn't what seized Harper's attention. In the back, in a small, climate-controlled office, was a simple framed photograph. It was Cormac. He was smiling, a wide, genuine, unguarded smile. His arm was around a young woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and the same dark Rourke hair. Maeve. Harper looked at the bottom of the frame, a small, embossed date, 3 months after the Camden Spur explosion. He smiled. Harper breathed, her mind racing. He smiled for her after Declan was gone. Cassian, this whole thing. It's not about Cormac's grief for Declan. It's about Maeve. Her disappearance is what broke him. Harper backed away, looking at the paintings, the ledgers, the photo. She staged her disappearance. She's been hiding inside your own accounts, draining the ADO, framing them, setting up Pier Street. She's trying to burn both the ADO and this family to the ground, all from the inside. Cashin stared at the picture of his father, his face a complex mask of betrayal and a terrible, dawning understanding. He was caught. To protect his family, he had to find Maeve. But to find Maeve, he had to accept she was the true enemy. The world squeezed Harper from the other side. The BII, furious at their public embarrassment, found her. Not Eamon, not Cassian, but a simple, dropped envelope at her mother's apartment. Inside was no bomb, just a single, typed page. They knew about the boatyard. They knew about her encrypted phone. They wanted the recording of Cassian's arms deal. The ultimatum was simple: give them the recording, and the mountain of debt shadowing her and her mother would be erased from every federal and private database. She would be clean, truly clean, refuse, and they would leak her name to the ADO as a Rourke informant. She was trapped between the feds who saw her as collateral and the Mafia Boss who saw her as a tool. That evening, the world tilted again. Cormac Rourke sent for her. Not Cassian, just her. They sat in his private study, a room that smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco. Though no pipes were present, Eamon stood outside the closed door. Cormac didn't speak for a full minute. He simply poured 2 glasses of water. His hand, she noticed, had a fine tremor. "That night," he said, his voice a low gravel, "the music. You brought Silas." "Yes, sir." He tapped his fingers on the desk, the rhythm hesitant, broken. "I used to be able to... the rhythm, it was clean. Now." He held up his hand, annoyed at its betrayal. How do you keep the rhythm when your hands shake? It wasn't a question about music. It was a confession, a plea for help from a man drowning in plain sight. Harper thought of her mother, of the long nights listening to the wheeze of the oxygen machine, watching her hands tremble as she tried to lift a glass of water. "You don't," Harper said softly. Cormac looked up, his eyes sharp. "You don't fight the shake," she said. "My mother. Her hands shake. From the medication. She told me the only way she can hold a cup is if she stops trying. She closes her eyes and counts, not her own breaths, mine. She counts the breaths of the person sitting next to her. She borrows their rhythm." Cormac stared at her, He said nothing, but as she sat there, holding her own breath, she saw him close his eyes. He was listening. She exhaled, slowly. He tapped his finger on the desk, a single, soft beat, perfectly in time. He inhaled, she inhaled. He tapped again. 1, 2, 3, 4. A slow, steady, borrowed pulse. He opened his eyes. They were wet. The lines around his mouth, carved by years of iron control, softened. A small, weak, but utterly genuine smile touched his lips. "Thank you, child," he whispered. No one else saw it. It wasn't for Cassian. It was for her. The door opened. Cassian stood there, frozen. He saw his father, his eyes wet, and Harper, sitting not as an employee, but as a confidant. He saw the empty glasses, the sudden intimacy of the quiet room. Am I interrupting?" His voice was clumsy, rough with an emotion Harper couldn't place. Jealousy, gratitude, confusion. "No," Cormac said, the smile gone, the mask returning. But his hand was steady now. "Miss Quinn was just leaving." Harper stood. As she passed Cassian in the doorway, he grabbed her arm, his grip possessive. "What was that?" he demanded, too loudly. "We were talking," Harper said. "That wasn't talking." "Let her go, Cassian," Cormac said, his voice firm. "The girl did what you asked." Cassian released her, his face a storm. He looked at his father, then at her, and the anger drained, replaced by a raw, painful sincerity. "I'm sorry," he said, and this time, the word wasn't crossed out. It was real. Before she could answer, Eamon appeared. "Sir, a package was left on the pier, for her." It was a small, oil-wrapped bundle, inside a heavy, wicked-looking dagger, its hilt carved from bone into the shape of a breaking wave. Tucked beneath it was a small, waterproof card. On it, a set of marine coordinates. "The ADO Treasury," Cassian breathed, recognizing the location. "Maeve, she's giving us the keys to the kingdom." Harper looked at the dagger, then at Cassian. She had her out, the BII was offering her freedom, but she looked at Cassian, at the man who had just apologized, at the father who had just smiled, and she made her choice. "We go," she said. "We use this to break the ADO. We save your father, but we do it my way." "Your way?" "No one dies," Harper said, her voice shaking but hard as steel. "We don't become them. We don't trade one monster for another. You want my help, you promise me that." Cassian looked at the coordinates, then at her. He saw the iron in her spine. He gave a single, sharp nod. "I'll try." The chase across the Patapsco canals was a blur of churning water and the high-pitched whine of outboard motors. 2 ADO interceptor boats had been on their tail since they'd left the Treasury coordinates, forcing them to run their smaller craft aground on a muddy, reed-choked bank. They fled on foot, scrambling up a steep, slick hill, pushing through thorn bushes and old-growth trees. Now, they were in a ruin, the abandoned greenhouse of an old, forgotten hilltop estate. The rain that had been threatening all day finally broke, hammering against the glass panels above, a violent, thousand-fingered drumming. Cassian slammed the rotted wooden door shut. The latch crumbled, useless, and he didn't care. He slumped against the frame, his chest heaving, pushing his wet hair off his forehead. His bespoke suit was ruined, soaked through and caked with mud. Harper was in no better shape, shivering, her thin jacket offering no protection. He looked at her, truly looked at her. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with blue. He shrugged off his heavy wool overcoat. It was streaming water, but he didn't hand it to her. "It's soaked," he said, his voice rough. Instead, he moved deeper into the greenhouse, past rows of dead, skeletal plants and shattered terracotta. In a dry corner, an old canvas tarp, thick and stiff, was folded on a potting bench. He shook it out a cloud of dust and dried leaves and handed it to her. Better than nothing, a towel. As she reached for it, her fingers brushed his. He saw his own hand. It was shaking. Not from fear, but from the frigid air and the sudden, violent crash of adrenaline. "You're cold," she whispered, her voice trembling. His dark eyes locked on hers, the hammering rain on the glass isolating them. The air was misty, their breath pluming in front of them. "So are you." She began to pat her face dry with the rough canvas, then stopped. A thin, angry red scratch, a souvenir from their run, marked his cheek. He hadn't flinched when it happened. He probably didn't even feel it. Without thinking, driven by an impulse she couldn't name, she reached up, her fingers, still cold, were impossibly gentle as she brushed the speck of mud away from the cut. He went utterly still, as if she had pulled a trigger. His hand shot up and caught her wrist. It wasn't a violent grip. He didn't pull her, he didn't push, he just held her. His thumb rested on her pulse, a frantic, trapped bird beating against his skin. His eyes were wide, dark, and stripped of all their armor. He was asking her a question without words. She leaned her head, just slightly, a small, trembling nod. He didn't devour her. He leaned in, agonizingly slowly, giving her every second to retreat. His other hand came up, not to her waist, not to her hair, but to her upper back. Between her shoulder blades, it was a gesture of support, of respect, a steadying pressure. The first touch of their lips was hesitant. Cold rain, warm breath. It was a question. She answered by exhaling, her body softening against his. The kiss deepened then, a slow, searching exploration. It tasted of the storm, of desperation, and of a tension that had been coiling between them for weeks. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of starvation. She felt the iron walls she had built around herself simply dissolve. This wasn't the Mafia Boss. This wasn't her jailer. This was just Cassian. Her hands, which had been frozen at her sides, came up, fisting in the material of his soaked shirt. She was the one who pulled him closer, closing that last inch, that last line of defense. He broke the kiss, but only to rest his forehead against hers. His eyes closed. They stood there, breathing each other in, their heartbeats a syncopated rhythm against the rain. A sound rumbled in his chest, so foreign she almost didn't recognize it. It was a laugh, a short, hoarse, rusty sound. "Harper," he breathed, his voice thick, "you make me remember I'm human." He kept one arm around her, guiding her to the dry corner. He found an old, faded horse blanket on a shelf, shook it clean, and spread it over the dry, mossy earth. He sat, pulling her down beside him. They didn't break any more lines. They didn't need to. The intimacy of the moment was in what wasn't happening. He wrapped the other half of the blanket around her shoulders, his arms staying, pulling her against his side. He was a solid, living furnace. They sat in the gathering darkness, listening to the rain. He turned her face to his, and the kisses that followed were different. They were long, deep, and quiet. Kisses of comfort, of discovery. His hand, no longer shaking, moved to her hair, his fingers gently working through the damp tangles. Her hand rested flat against his chest, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart. It was the most honest thing she had ever felt. He lay back on the blanket, pulling her with him. She rested her head in the hollow of his shoulder, his arms a secure cage around her, the blanket cocooning them. The rain was a lullaby. "My greatest fear," he whispered into her hair, the admission so quiet it was almost stolen by the storm, was that I would become him, the man he was. Before you, the stone, that I'd win this war with the ADO, only to find I'd forgotten how to feel anything, that I'd become a cold, empty copy of my father's grief. Harper tilted her head, looking up at the sharp line of his jaw. "I'll remind you," she promised, her voice fierce and soft. "When you forget, I'll be there. I'll remind you to breathe, just like I did for him." He crushed her to him, a hug that was almost painful in its gratitude. "When this is done," he said, the words a vow. "After we deal with Maeve, after we clean the ADO, we're leaving. Not forever, just for a week. We'll go somewhere warm, somewhere the water is just water, not a shipping lane. We'll learn how to be normal. Normal, she repeated. The words sounded like a miracle. I would like that. They must have slept, their bodies giving in to exhaustion. Harper woke to the weak. Gray light of dawn. The rain had stopped. The greenhouse was silent. Save for the drip of water from the broken glass, she was still in his arms. For one perfect suspended moment, the world was only this warmth, this quiet. They stood, stiff and cold, but their hands found each other. He laced his fingers through hers, a natural, easy fit. They stepped out of the greenhouse into the pale, muddy light of morning. And the world came crashing back. His encrypted phone, in the pocket of his discarded, soaked jacket, began to buzz. The sound was a violation. He retrieved it, his face, which had been soft in sleep, hardened into the familiar mask of the Rourke boss. "What is it?" Harper asked, her heart sinking. Cassian's hand tightened on hers, his knuckles white. "It's Eamon, the ADO. They know we hit the treasury. They've summoned my father. They're holding a hearing at the Dominion warehouse. Tonight." He looked at her, his eyes hollow. "It's not a hearing, Harper. It's a trial. It's an execution." The Dominion warehouse was not a building. It was a judgment, a cathedral of cold-rolled steel and echoing silence. It was built on a massive pier over the deepest, darkest part of the channel. The ADO Council, 12 men and women, sat on a raised steel dais in the center of the vast, hollow space. There was a circle of reinforced glass, 50 feet wide, the floor. It looked down on the black, churning water 50 feet below. This was where the Atlantic Dockyard Organization erased its problems. Harper's hands were slick inside her gloves. She was disguised, wearing the dark gray jumpsuit of an audio technician, her hair tucked tightly under a nondescript baseball cap. Her earpiece, currently silent, linked her to Eamon, who was moving through the damp, narrow salt tunnels that ran beneath the warehouse, ready at the designated escape hatch. Their plan was desperate, layered in 3 parts. One, Harper, at the main tech booth, would use the chaos to swap the ADO's encrypted main server with a hard drive from Pelican 42, a drive containing only the art ledgers. 2, Eamon would create a diversion to get Cormac off that terrifying glass floor. 3, Harper would simultaneously activate a hidden live stream, broadcasting the ADO's real accounting, the stolen Port Orphans Fund, to a BII server and a public media drop. Burning the council from the outside? Cassian was the bait. He had walked in voluntarily, flanked by ADO enforcers, playing the part of the defendant, ready to answer for his family's sins. He stood near the edge of the glass, his stance relaxed, his eyes scanning, a predator waiting for the trap to spring. They brought Cormac out. He was not restrained, but he was surrounded. He walked with a stiff, proud dignity, his face carved from granite. The trial began. The ADO chairman spoke, his voice booming over the speakers. "Cormac Rourke, you are accused of breaking the pact, of lying to this council about the nature of the Camden Spur explosion. You are accused of treason." "A correction," a sharp female voice cut through the air. A woman emerged from the shadows near the dais, her heels clicking decisively on the steel. She had dark Rourke hair and eyes that burned with a cold, terrifying intelligence. Cassian's body went rigid. Maeve. It was the saltwater stranger. She looked at Cassian, then turned her gaze on Cormac, her expression a mix of pity and contempt. "He is guilty," Maeve announced, her voice ringing with authority. "But not of treason. He's guilty of being a sentimental fool." She activated the large screens above the dais. A grainy security photo appeared, showing Declan Rourke handing a package to a known ADO rival, hours before the blast. "Cormac did not cause the explosion," Maeve said, her voice dripping acid. "His son did. Declan was trying to save a friend who had defaulted on a debt. He was moving contraband on his own. Without authorization, he made a mistake, and it cost him his life." She looked at Cormac. "And my uncle. to protect the honor of his dead, reckless son, took the blame. He buried the truth. He lied to this council. He committed the ultimate sin. He put family before business. The chairman's face was dark. The why did not matter. He lied. The verdict stands. Open the floor. The sound of hydraulics engaging was sickening. The massive glass circle in the center of the room began to retract. Cormac stumbled back, but not fast enough. The steel edge retreated, leaving him on a shrinking island of glass. "No!" Cassian roared. He wasn't playing the defendant anymore. He launched himself forward, diving across the gap, tackling his father. He grabbed Cormac just as the last piece of glass slid away, leaving them both dangling over the void, Cassian holding the steel ledge with one hand and his father's arm with the other. "Cassian!" Harper screamed. She didn't wait. She grabbed the high-tensile safety line launcher Eamon had disguised as a microphone stand. She aimed at the steel girder directly above them and fired. The magnetic clamp hit the beam with a loud, metallic clang. The line spooled out, swinging toward them. Cassian, his muscles straining, let go of the ledge, grabbed the line, and secured the harness around his father. They were safe. For a second, dangling like spiders over the black water. "My turn," Harper whispered. Her hands flew across the console. She initiated the server swap. As alarms began to blare, she activated the live stream. "You want to see a crime," her voice, modulated and amplified, boomed through the warehouse. The main screens, which had been showing Cassian and Cormac, flickered. They now showed the ledgers, the bank accounts, the systematic, decades-long theft of the Port Orphans Fund. "The ADO has been stealing from the widows and children of the men who built this port," her voice declared. The council members panicked, drawing weapons, shouting. In the midst of the chaos, Maeve Rourke stood perfectly still, a slow, terrible smile spreading across her face. "Now," she whispered, "burn." At that exact moment, the main cargo doors exploded inward. The Pier Street crew, alerted to the chaos, stormed the warehouse. "Find the server. Get the ADO server." Harper, seeing the new threat, acted instantly. She rerouted the warehouse schematics on the main screen, highlighting a false path. "Server located," a computerized voice announced. "Loading Bay 42. The Pier Street crew took the bait, bypassing the tech booth and charging toward the decoy location, the cold storage unit full of stolen art. Above the chaos, Cassian and Eamon, who had emerged from the salt tunnel, were hauling Cormac back onto the solid steel floor. Cassian pulled his father into his arms and collapsing onto the grating, both men gasping. Cormac gripped his son's jacket, his eyes, for the first time in 5 years, truly alive. "If we live through this," he rasped, I want to hear you play the drums again." A brief, painful, genuine smile flashed across his face. The ADO was broken. The Pier Street crew was diverted. Harper had done it. She sagged against the console, her knees weak. Maeve appeared at her side, untouched by the chaos. She held the wave-carved dagger, offering it hilt first to Harper. "They're finished," Maeve said, her voice calm. "The Rourkes, the ADO, the whole rotten structure. You have a choice. Help me burn the rest of it down. Or chain yourself to him." She nodded toward Cassian, who was now helping his father to his feet. "Rourke, or the fire." Harper looked at the knife, the symbol of Maeve's endless, cold revenge. She looked at Cassian, who was already moving toward her. She did not take the knife. "I choose the truth," Harper said. The distant, synchronized wail of sirens grew louder, converging on the Dominion warehouse from every direction. Red and blue lights flooded the pier, refracting off the wet steel, turning the chaotic scene into a silent, flashing tableau. The Bureau of Integrity and Investigation, the BII, had arrived, not in a clumsy raid, but with the full, overwhelming force of a tactical siege. A man in a severe black suit, Agent Lysander Cho, stepped onto the warehouse floor, his team fanning out, securing the stunned ADO council members. Cho, however, walked directly past them, past the Pier Street stragglers, toward the tech booth. He stopped 10 feet from Harper, his eyes assessing. "Miss Quinn," he said, his voice surprisingly calm amid the flashing lights. "You've had a busy night. We have an offer. Full witness protection, a new life, all debts cleared. We just need a clean statement from you. Testify that Cormac and Cassian Rourke orchestrated tonight's violence. Give us the Rourkes, and you walk away." Before Harper could breathe, Cassian stepped in front of her, shielding her. "She's not your bargaining chip. Cho—" "She is if she's smart," Maeve's voice cut in. She stood near the dais, flanked by 2 of her own people. "Or you can let the media I just contacted tear you all apart. The ADO, the Rourkes. I'll burn the whole corrupt structure down by sunrise." "Do it," Cassian said, his voice ragged. He looked at Harper, his eyes full of a terrible resolve. "Take me. Cho, I'll confess. Conspiracy, the arms deal, tonight's violence. All of it. I'll give you the Rourke family. But she walks, and my father walks." "No," Harper said, her voice shaking but hard. "I won't let you." She turned to Agent Cho, ignoring Cassian's protest. "You don't want him. You want the ADO. I'm giving them to you." She slotted a data drive into Cho's waiting hand. "That's the entire ledger for the Port Orphans Fund. Every dollar they stole. Every account they used. It's clean. It's undeniable. And it's enough to bury the entire council for decades." Cho looked at the drive. "What's not on here?" "My recording from the boatyard," she said, her eyes locked on his. "The audio of the gunfight tonight. This drive has no Rourke blood on it. It's the ADO. Take your win, Agent Cho." A sudden crash of metal from the loading bay. The last of the Pier Street crew, realizing they were trapped, tried to shoot their way out. Eamon, moving to cover Cormac, grunted and fell, his hand clutching his side. "Eamon," Cassian yelled, running to him. Harper was right behind him. They reached Eamon in the shadows of a container. He was bleeding, a dark stain spreading on his jacket. "It's nothing, boss." "It's not nothing," Harper said, tearing open her sleeve. "Put pressure on it. Now." She pushed her balled-up sleeve into Cassian's hand and guided it to the wound. "Hold him. Talk to him." Cassian gripped the wound, his hands covered in his friend's blood. He looked at Harper, her face pale but fiercely competent, her hands already working to secure a better bandage from Eamon's own kit. In that dark corner, surrounded by enemies, the 3 of them became a single unit, their trust forged not in promises, but in blood and desperation. "You're a fool, Harper," Maeve spat, walking toward them. "You're saving a wounded animal. You should have let them all burn." "You don't want them to burn," Harper said, looking up, her hands still steady on Eamon's bandage. "You just want to be the one holding the match. You don't want to destroy the ADO, you want to replace it." "It's a rotten system," Maeve said, her eyes flashing. "I'll build a new one, a clean one, efficient, fair. But yes, it will still collect its toll." Power," Harper said, disgusted. "It was never about Declan. It was about you wanting power." Cassian looked at his cousin, the woman he thought was dead, and saw only a stranger. He was torn. His family was broken, his world was on fire, and the woman he was beginning to love was offering a way out that cost him his soul. "Cassian," Cormac said, his voice weak but clear. He had walked over, his hand on Eamon's shoulder. He looked at his son, his eyes finally, truly clear. "You did it. You made me smile. Don't stop now. Make yourself smile. Choose your freedom." Cassian looked at his father, at Eamon, and then at Harper. He knew what he had to do. Harper stood up, facing Maeve. "Cassian, get your father and Eamon to the exit. This ends now." She walked back to the tech booth, Maeve following her. "What are you doing, girl?" "My final move," Harper said. She activated the public media drop, the one she had set up for the BII. "You're right, the whole system is rotten, so let's burn the whole thing. The ADO ledgers. And yours." She hit the key, the full ADO ledgers, the stolen orphan fund, the arms deals, and the entire ledger for Maeve's Saltwater Society, complete with her digital signature on every transaction, went public. Maeve's face went white. She was no longer a ghost. She was a criminal, with a digital paper trail leading straight to her. She could stay and fight and go to prison for life, or she could run. Maeve glared at Harper, her eyes promising murder, but she was a realist. She gave a single, sharp nod, and she and her two operatives vanished into the salt tunnels. She was gone. The warehouse was quiet, save for the groan of the settling steel. Agent Cho walked up to Cassian. "I have enough on this drive to keep my office busy for a decade. The ADO is finished." "And us?" Cassian asked. "A deal," Cho said. "Limited immunity. The Rourke organization dismantles. All of it. No more arms, no more shadows, no more safe corridors. The Orphans Fund becomes a public trust, monitored by my office." Cassian looked at his father, who nodded. He looked at Eamon, who was on his feet, grimacing but alive. He looked at Harper. "We agree," Cassian said. "One condition." "I'm not in a negotiating mood," Cho said. "Her name," Cassian said, his voice low and hard. "Harper Quinn. Her name stays out of every file, every report, every conversation. She was never here. She's not an informant. She's not a witness. She doesn't exist." Cho looked at Harper, who was wiping blood from her hands. He looked at the chaos she had caused and the greater chaos she had prevented. He gave a small, respectful sigh. "She's just a waitress," Cho said, closing his notebook. "Someone who knows how to count a beat, and I suppose that's enough." The dissolution of the Rourke Empire was quieter than its reign. In the weeks that followed the firefight at the Dominion warehouse, Cassian was true to his word. Armored cars were sold at auction. Businesses built on shadows were liquidated. The Rourke name, once a symbol of fear on the docks, began to mean something else. The most profound change was Cormac. In a move that stunned the city, he held a press conference, his first ever, not in a high-rise, but on the freshly swept steps of the Moonlight Dock. He announced he was donating the building, along with a significant endowment, to the city. It was to be a music center for the port's underserved youth. When a reporter asked him why, Cormac didn't give a prepared statement. He looked into the cameras, the lines around his eyes softened by a new, unfamiliar light. "My son, my youngest son loved this room," he said, his voice rough. "It's time to let the music play again." And he smiled. It wasn't the weak, pained smile Harper had coaxed from him. It was a full, rustic, public smile. It reached his eyes. Cassian was just as thorough in his promise to Harper. 2 days after the warehouse, her mother's medical debt, all $62,000 of it, was paid in full by an anonymous trust. The next week, the BII, using the ledgers Cassian had leaked to them, indicted the entire leadership of the Pier Street crew. They were gone, not paused, not warned off, gone, vanished from her life as if they had never been. Harper was, for the first time in her adult life, free. 6 months passed, the city healed. Harper opened a cafe. It was a small, bright space in a rented building near the old lighthouse, far from the industrial piers. The sign she painted herself, Harbor and Hush. It smelled of dark roast coffee, cinnamon, and fresh-baked apple quince pie. She paid her quarterly taxes. She hired a part-time dishwasher. She worried about the price of milk. It was a beautiful, simple, normal life. The bell over the door chimed one Tuesday night in November, just as she was wiping down the counter. A cold rain, one that reminded her of the gull's nest, was lashing the windows. It was Cassian. He looked thinner, and he wasn't wearing a suit. He wore dark jeans, worn leather boots, and a heavy wool coat that dripped onto her clean floor. He looked like a man, not a boss, but the shadows under his eyes told of the battles he'd been fighting. "We're closed," she said, her hands freezing on the rag. "I know," he said. His voice was the same, a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. I needed to see this." He looked around the small, warm cafe, at the mismatched chairs, the local art on the walls. "It's good, Harper, it's safe." "Cassian, what are you doing here?" He finally met her eyes. "I'm leaving Baltimore. For a while." Her heart, which had been beating at a steady coffee shop rhythm, faltered. "The deal with Cho," he explained, walking closer to the counter. "It was just the first cut. The ADO is broken, but the pieces are still sharp. The other families are circling. I have to go. Harper, I have to sew up the last cracks, make sure the piece holds, and make sure no one can ever pull my family back into that life." "So you're going back," she said, her voice flat, the rag clutched in her fist. "I'm going to end it," he corrected, his voice fierce. "For good, so I can come back. Normal, like we talked about." He was close now, separated only by the wooden counter. He reached across it, his hand covering hers. She didn't pull away. "I'm afraid," she whispered, the admission costing her. He walked around the counter. He didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms. It wasn't the desperate, cold clinch in the greenhouse. This was a long, slow, crushing hug that was meant to last. It was warm, solid, and real. She buried her face in the damp wool of his coat, inhaling the scent of him rain, soap, and something metallic, like resolve. "Don't disappear," she murmured against his chest, her eyes squeezed shut. "Don't you dare become a ghost, Cassian Rourke." He held her tighter, one hand in her hair. "Count my breaths, Harper," he said, his voice rough in her ear. "Even when I'm gone, just count them. I'll still be breathing. I'm coming back to you." He didn't leave right away. He followed her into the small kitchen as she finished her closing duties, his presence filling the tiny space. She turned from the sink, drying her hands, and he was there, blocking her way. He reached up and gently touched her jaw. "You look peaceful, happy." "I am," she whispered. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. Their breaths mingled. It was an intimacy more profound than any kiss. She felt the tension in his shoulders, the exhaustion of the last 6 months. He laced his fingers through hers, his palm rough against her. "This isn't fair," she said, her eyes still closed, "to make me feel normal. And then, this." "I know." He tilted his head, his lips brushing hers. The kiss was deep but restrained, filled with a painful, quiet sweetness. It was a kiss of promises, not of passion. It was a kiss that said, "Wait for me." He stayed until the first hint of gray dawn, until the rain had softened to a mist. He stood at the back door of the kitchen. "I'll be gone by sunrise," he said. He pressed something long, hard, and wooden into her hand. She looked down. It was one of Cormac's vintage drumsticks, sanded smooth with age. Burned into the side, in a sharp, elegant script, were 2 letters, H.Q. He kissed her one last time, hard and quick, a final brand, and then he stepped out into the mist and was gone. Life resumed its new, steady rhythm. Harper taught the local kids who came in for cookies how to tap beats on the tables. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a patient waltz. She was waiting, but not with desperation. She was waiting with a calm, steady beat. But the city's old rhythms were returning. Rumors on the docks, whispers from her suppliers, the shattered remnants of the ADO were regrouping. A final, secret meeting was being called to fill the power vacuum the Rourkes had left. One afternoon, Eamon, now Cormac's driver and the head of security for the music school, walked into the harbor and hush. He looked grim. "He's been gone 3 weeks, Eamon said, his voice low. "He should have been back." "What is it, Eamon?" "Maeve, she's gone. Fled the country, but she left a package for me, with a letter inside for you." He handed her a crisp, white envelope, inside a single postcard of a barren salt flat. On the back, in that familiar, sharp script, were 7 words. "Don't let them pull Cassian back in." Harper's blood ran cold. She looked at the postcard, then out the window at the peaceful lighthouse. The final knot was not untied. This was not over. This was just the prelude. The Seabright Vault was a concrete bunker sunk deep into the main pier, a place built to survive a Category 5 hurricane and the ensuing federal audits. The new ADO, A skeletal assembly of vultures and remnants had gathered. Their plan was simple. The port was bleeding money without a Rourke at the helm. They did not want a war. They wanted a puppet. Cassian had been summoned. Harper knew about the meeting, but the real warning came from an anonymous, encrypted text to the burner phone she had kept. Seabright stage, saltwater signature, same as the bridge. They are framing him. A salt bomb, the same signature as the one that had killed Declan. It was not Maeve. It was the last, desperate remnants of the Pier Street crew, trying to reclaim their territory by framing Cassian for a new wave of terror. She did not call Eamon. She did not call the BII. She ran. She left the harbor in hush, the bell on the door ringing frantically, the drumstick Cassian had given her shoved deep into the back of her jeans. She reached the vault's perimeter just as the BII, led by Agent Cho, was locking down the block. They were monitoring, not engaging. Cho saw her sprinting past the barricade, his face hardening. He grabbed her arm, spinning her. "Miss Quinn, you are interfering in a federal—" His voice was loud, official. He pushed her, hard, not back, but toward a dark, narrow service duct. His voice dropped to a hiss. "For her ears only. You have 4 minutes. After that, this is a hostile situation, and I cannot protect you. I will classify this as a civilian rescue." She nodded once and plunged into the darkness. She emerged into the crawl space beneath the main stage. It smelled of rust and cold water. Above her, she could hear the low rumble of voices. The meeting had begun, and she heard it, a faint, high-pitched click, 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 a timer reacting to the humid, salty air. She crawled frantically toward the sound, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grip the steel beams. The terror of the moment, the closeness of death. It was paralyzing. Count his breaths. The memory of the greenhouse, of his promise, cut through the panic. She closed her eyes. Inhale. Exhale. She remembered his warmth, her hands steadied. She found it a crude device, packed with industrial salt and accelerant, wired directly to the main speaker system. Above her, Cassian stood at the podium. He looked exhausted, but his spine was steel. "My family is out," he was saying, his voice amplified. "The Rourke name is not for sale. Not now. Not ever." He was rejecting their offer. He scanned the room, and his gaze flickered, catching a shadow of movement through the floor grating. He saw her. He did not stop. He did not falter. He simply changed tactics, his voice rising in manufactured anger. "You think you can summon me? You think you own this port?" He stepped forward, away from the podium, toward the center of the stage, drawing every eye in the room. He was giving her cover. Harper's fingers flew, pulling the detonator wires from the detonator. It was done. The clicking stopped. She looked up, through the grating, to the observation balcony. Cormac and Eamon were there, flanked by 2 of Cho's agents, detained for their own safety. Cormac, watching his son, had seen the entire, silent exchange. He lifted the drumstick he now carried everywhere. He tapped the steel railing, 3 soft, distinct beats, tap, 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 the all clear. She disarmed it. The shout came from the wings. A man, his face twisted in rage, the new leader of the Pier Street crew, lunged from the shadows. He grabbed Harper just as she was climbing out of the crawl space, yanking her back by the hair, a long, glittering knife finding the soft skin of her throat. "Nobody moves," he screamed. "The Rourkes want me dead. They get to watch this first." Cassian froze. He had a weapon tucked in his jacket, but he did not reach for it. He slowly unbuttoned his coat and let the handgun he was carrying clatter to the floor. He advanced, step by step, his hands open. "Let her go." "She's my insurance," the man shrieked, pulling Harper tighter. Cassian stopped. His eyes were not angry. They were filled with a cold, terrifying calm. "She is my heart," he said, his voice quiet, but it echoed in the stunned silence of the vault. "You touch her, and it all ends, for everyone." The man faltered, confused by the raw, desperate admission, in that single half-second of hesitation, Harper, who had been holding a decoy knife from her boot, let it drop. As the man's eyes flickered down, she drove the hard maple drumstick, the one marked HQ, upward, jamming the blunt end hard into the man's wrist. He roared in pain, his grip breaking, the knife spinning away. Eamon, moving from the balcony, was on him, a tackle that shook the entire stage. The vault erupted. ADO men drew their weapons. BI agents stormed the room. Agent Cho, seeing the deal about to collapse into a bloodbath, raised his weapon to the ceiling. He fired. It was not a bullet. A magnesium cold charge detonated, flooding the room with a blinding, harmless white light. B.I. Cho roared into the chaos. "This meeting is over. Everyone on the floor." He had preserved the agreement. Harper was coughing, her ears ringing, the spots fading from her eyes. Cassian was there, pulling her to her feet, his hands checking her neck, her arms, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You are all right. You are safe." They were not kissing. They were clinging to each other, simply breathing. Across the room, Cormac Rourke stood on the balcony, watching. He saw his son, alive and whole. He saw the woman who had saved him, who had saved them all. He saw the end of the long war. And Cormac Rourke smiled. It was not the ghost of a smile from the study. It was not the fleeting flash from the warehouse. It was a wide, beaming, undeniable smile of pure, unadulterated joy. The promise was fulfilled. The deal was done. Cassian looked up and saw it. He laughed, a short, breathless sound of disbelief. He turned Harper in his arms, his grip firm, and he faced the stunned crowd, his father and the BII. "The debts," Cassian said, his voice loud, a proclamation that sealed the new world. "Harper Quinn, any debt she ever had in this city, in this life, real or imagined, is erased." He pulled her closer, his hand flat over her heart. "But your love," he whispered, for her ears only, then louder, for the room. "I do not dare erase that. I am asking to keep it." The BII's public announcement of the Port Orphans Fund becoming a community trust effectively neutered the ADO. Maeve Rourke sent one last postcard, this time from a Bolivian salt flat. It said, "You kept the sea quiet. Good." The Moonlight Dock became the city's most vibrant music school, with Cormac Rourke as its most dedicated and surprisingly patient teacher. Harbor and Hush became the official, unofficial hub for the port, known for the best coffee in Baltimore, and for the quiet, unscheduled jazz sets that sometimes started after closing. The lights were off. The shop was closed. The faint shh of a drum brush came from the corner, where Cormac and Silas were nursing drinks. Cassian took Harper's hand, pulling her from the counter into a slow dance between the darkened tables. He was not a boss. He was a man. He was human, and he was home. He kissed her gently, a deep, slow, final promise. His lips tasting of the coffee and cinnamon, he leaned his forehead against hers. "Breathe in," he whispered, his voice a low rumble in the quiet. "Breathe out. Stay." Thank you for listening to this story. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect. And please share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, I invite you to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Story. Like this video, and give it some extra support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.